Welcome to the Google Data Studio walkthrough, the companion video to the Arts Data Handbook. If you've already got the book, then hi, I hope that's how you landed here. If you don't have the book, you can find it at theartsworkplace.com. A quick note before I begin, everything from here works the same, whether you're connecting your own organization's data or a practice set. For the purposes of this demo, I'm using the Anytown Performing Arts Center practice data that you can find on the Learning Library page. Our first step is to connect the data source. I'm going to do that today directly from Google Sheets. I'm going to start at the artsworkplace.com/learning, and I'm going to open up the Anytown Performing Arts Center ticket data file from the Google Drive. You can access it there too if you need to use it. That pops up a preview window in Google Drive. Up in the upper right, you go to Open With and you select Google Sheets to formally move into Google Sheets. Then once in Google Sheets, we're going to open Data Studio. You go to the Extensions menu, Data Studio, Create Report. Be sure to check Use First Row for headers. It's checked by default. I'm including all cells, and I'm clicking Create. Now, what Data Studio will do, it will try to get you started by guessing at what kind of reporting you'd want from the data it's looking at. So you can see here, as soon as I went into this, it gave me a pie chart for price types and a bar chart for marketing sources and a couple of filters. We're not going to use this. We'll end up deleting this. So just note that as you go through and build your report, you'll also be working on the formatting of the report while you do it. The first thing I'm going to do is go up here and change the name of the dashboard, MO dashboard. And then I'm going to click Save because I previously neglected to hit save and lost the dashboard. So we're going to hit save before we do literally anything else. Once you do that, it will auto-save with your edits. Okay, the very next thing we're going to do is check our fields and data types. You can see here is the sheet you connected and all of the fields that are available in that sheet on the right side of the screen. Before I build anything, I'm going to open the fields list. You can do that by going to Resource, Manage Added Data Sources, and clicking Edit on the data source. And then I'm going to check that the data type is correct on each field. And then while I'm in here, I'll set some default aggregations as well. This is not a necessary step, but it's going to make life a lot easier later on. For example, if there's a number that you know you always want summed, or you always want averaged, or you always want a count of, if you set it here, it will do that by default while you're setting up metrics. To change the data type, you just click on the type symbol here. From what I can see, my data types look good. Just note there may be some instances in which you might want a number to behave like text instead, maybe like a customer number or a fiscal year. So that's an option as well. In fact, I am going to change fiscal year to text, which will make it easier to use it as a filter. While I'm in here, I'm also going to rename this table. I'll just call it my raw data. And then I'm going to click Done and close this window. Okay. Now it's time to start building our report. So first I'm going to do a little cleanup. I'm going to delete these charts that I know I don't want. I'm going to change the color of this header bar. I'm going to leave it because I like it, but let's put a color that's more appropriate for our brand. I'm going to add a title. It's the dashboard. And then you can see every element you click on has setup and style options that show on this property screen. So I'm gonna change the color. I'm going to give it a larger font size. I'm gonna slide it over a bit. There you go. Okay. I'm also noticing some filters that have been pre-populated here, but these are not the filters I want. So I'm gonna click on this first filter. I'm gonna go into setup and I can see the control field. The value that's on the filter is venue. I'm gonna change that to fiscal year. And you can see what I'm talking about right there. Okay. For performance code, I don't need performance code. I think a more general event type is probably more appropriate. There's also this themes option. Now would be a good time to just go and select a theme. Doesn't do too much for you, but I'm going to go ahead and select that one. Okay, now it's time to add our very first metric. And we will do that by adding a scorecard for ticket revenue. Up here at the top menu bar, you can see the add a chart option. And right at the top, you can see the scorecard options. I'm just going to select the typical scorecard. You see it's there with my cursor, and you can just click to put it in place. You can enlarge it. It'll default to record count. You can see on the right in the properties window, there's record count. I'm going to just click over here to revenue and drag and drop, and it's going to give me revenue. I need to change the format of the revenue. I also want to check that it's got the correct aggregation. It does. It has some, but here are all the other options if I wanted to handle that differently. I want it formatted as currency, and then I definitely don't need those decimal points, so I'm going to go here and say number 0, which removes the decimal points. If you go into this style menu here, other changes you can make based on my preferences. I'm going to turn I'm going to turn on the chart title. Maybe I'm going to bump up the font a bit. Okay, font color's good. If I want to, I can change it to the bottom instead of the top. I prefer the top. This is also where you can add conditional formatting. I'm going to hide the field name, so that removes that secondary label. I'm going to center everything. I want to add a little more padding to the top so that this sits more in the center of the card. There we go. And then I'm going to give it a nice light background color. How about this nice blue? I don't like that. How about a gray? There we go. And now you have a nice, neat revenue card. Okay, the next number I really like to add to my dashboard is average ticket price. And just like we did in the book, we're going to go ahead and build it here because it doesn't exist in the data I uploaded. And so this is where you'd use a calculated field, which is super easy to do. Just go over here to your data. At the bottom of the data field, you see add a field. Choose calculated field. If you're familiar with Excel, this shouldn't be too complicated, but all you're going to do in the formula field is add the fields you need to perform a calculation on. So that's going to be revenue. And then we're going to put in a division symbol. And then we're going to add tickets. Great. And there's your formula. And then you need to give it a name, average ticket price. Okay. And click save. And now you see average ticket price. One tip I'd have is to work on one scorecard or chart, get all of the formatting settings to the place you want them to be, and then you can just copy it over to create your next set of metrics, and all of your settings will be in place. So I'm just going to duplicate my revenue card. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to replace revenue with average ticket price. That doesn't look right. That's because the aggregation is not right. It's trying to sum the average ticket price. You want an average of the average. Okay. You also want this displayed as currency. Now, before you say, okay, I'm done, there's a bit of a flaw in this that we need to fix. And that is our average ticket price just took revenue and divided it by tickets. But in this data set, tickets include all types of tickets, including comp tickets. So including comp tickets in your average ticket price is going to bring down that average. And so what you want to add is a filter that's going to remove those comp tickets. And you can do that directly on the scorecard or the chart. If you scroll down right here, there is a filter option. So I'm going to build a filter for paid tickets. Let's see, the field I want to use is price category. I'm looking at my conditions and they're all, let's see, equals, contains, in. Okay, which means I don't want to say include here. I want to say exclude price categories that contain comp. And that should be all I need. And see, now it recalculates and it went up significantly. Now I'm going to show you a more complicated trick, and that is how to take your very granular row level data and aggregate it into a summary chart right here within Data Studio so that you don't have to add multiple files to get those summaries. So for example, for performance level metrics, we need a table that is going to sum up all of our values and group them by performance instead of by each transaction. The next metric I want to add is the capacity percentage. So what I need to do is first build what's called a new extract, an extract data source. You do this from the resource menu. You go to Manage Added Data Sources. You add a new data source, and then you just search for extract. Click on it. And then it just pops up this window where you can build a new table with your existing dimensions. Now, if you're looking for a performance summary report, you're not going to just want performances. I'd start a little higher than that. You need to select your data source first, raw data. Now I'm going to add fiscal year. And I probably want event type. And I need the name of the production. I want the performance date. And then just for good measure, I may not use it, but I'm going to throw performance ID in case I need something to link this table to later on. And then on the metrics, you just want the metrics that would naturally come with a performance. So tickets, I want to know how many tickets for each performance. I want to know how much revenue. Let's see, I want to know attended. Okay, so we have a pretty good summary table here. I'm going to click auto update. I'm going to let it update itself. And I'm going to click save and extract. All right, here we go. And then you can see on the right now you have two fields. You have raw data, and then you have your extract data. I didn't see a place on that previous screen where I could retitle this. So I'm going to go back into my Manage Added Data Sources. And I'm going to click Edit on this. And I think now up here where it says Extract Data, I can give it a real title. All right. Now that I have this secondary table, I can add calculated fields to this table as well. So I'm going to add a field. Oh, I just realized in my data, I don't have my capacity for my performances. Now, in this instance, this data is all one value, which means the capacity is the same for every performance in this instance. That may not be true for you, in which case you'd want to make sure to bring capacity in with your data. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to manually add it. So I'm going to add a field called capacity. And all I have to do is type the number in here. Capacity for the Anytown Performing Arts Center is 1,500. So all I have to do is type 1,500 and save. And for each performance, it's going to add a capacity of 1,500. All right, now that we have our capacity, we're going to add another calculated field to add the capacity percent. I'm just going to call it capacity percent. And like you saw earlier with average ticket price, all we need is to divide tickets by our newly added capacity metric and click save. Now would be a good time to check on the data type and aggregation settings for this new table that I built. So just like the data you connected in your Google Sheet, you can also go to this table you created through the extract tool, click edit, and you can verify types and aggregations. So I'm going to go through, I want capacity to be a default of sum. I want averages for capacity percent. I want capacity percent to show as 8%. Okay, I'm looking at these others. These are great. I want performance ID to be a unique count. That shouldn't be a sum. Okay, great. Done. And now I'm going to add my capacity percent on the card. When you copy a card, you do have to change the data source if you're going to pull from a different table. So I'm going to change that to performance summary. Now I'm going to drag over my capacity percent. And it's got an old filter, so I need to remove that. Great. So now we have our capacity. Okay, now continuing to use this new performance summary table and to make sure we have a comparison point on our dashboard, I am going to try a gauge and create revenue compared to goal. Okay, let's add revenue. Oh, and I just realized we also don't have our revenue goal, which is another field that I'm going to add manually. Now, I'm going to keep this super simple for this demo. In your case, this might have to be an additional file that you bring in to make sure it's accurate or something that you add manually. I'm just going to assume for the purposes of just building this that every performance has the same $50,000 goal and I'm going to add it manually. But obviously this is not reality. So you might have to use another method to get your goal in there. Okay, now we need to add the goal that I've just created. As I'm building this gauge chart, I'm trying to figure out how to add goal. And I've discovered that you can only add fixed ranges on this chart. So that would be one way of doing it. You could put in a max. So that's one way, but that's manual. It's not dynamic. So the better option then is to actually do this as a bar chart. I'm going to get rid of this and I'm going to add a bar chart. I think I'm going to leave fiscal year. That's great. I'm going to get rid of capacity percent. I'm going to add revenue. Great. And then I'm going to add goal as a second metric. Great. So that is one way you could do this. And I'm just looking at various settings here, and I do not believe that overlapping bars is a feature that's available in Data Studio. And you'll find Data Studio is great because it's fairly easy and it's free, but it has limited features compared to some of the more sophisticated paid models. So just keep that in mind. However, there are a lot of workarounds for these things that take a little more time, and you can find a lot of tips online, on YouTube, and other places to get there. But here's another way to do a revenue versus goal comparison. I'm gonna move this chart, see if I can get away with making this a little smaller. Our next step is to build our trend chart. In this case, it'll be a line chart that is a time series. It'll be tickets over time. All right, we're gonna add our line chart, our time series chart. I'm gonna place it right here. We're gonna make it a little wider. And by default, it has picked up revenue. So you can see we have order date on the x-axis, which is exactly what we want. On the y-axis, revenue would be fine, but we actually want tickets in this case because we're looking at tickets over time. There we go. So you can see this is on a daily basis, all of the tickets. Let's go into style. This is where you can have a little fun. I want to show a chart title. I want it to be a little bit bigger, bolder. There we go. Let's see what else we have. Oh, a gradient would be nice. If you wanted a running total instead, you could do that. We're not going to do that in this case. They've got a variety of styling options, legend options. What I'm looking for right now is actually the border color. I'm going to add a border to my chart to give it some shape, and I'm going to make it a little heavier. There you go. It looks very nice. All right, so we've got our time series. Here, let's stretch this down a little bit. It's looking at several years of data here, which is not typically what you're going to want. So this is a great place to add some filters. I'm going to add another paid tickets filter for this one because I only want paid tickets, not comp. So we're going to exclude price category contains. And that'll change the shape. And then I want to reduce the time frame. And you can use relative dates to do that. You'd also do that with a filter. We'd use order date. And they've got a couple of conditions you can use for relative dating. We're going to just say is in the last 12. And then you get some time frames here, months. And then we're going to name it last 12 months. All right, we're getting pretty close to done. There is one important step that we've missed, and that is the date range filter, which is the most basic of basic filters. If you have no other filters, you want a date range filter. In Data Studio, which is a little different from some other BI tools, you want to use what's called a control. So this isn't just a standard metric in your data. This is up here, you have add a control, and you have a date range control. And you will just find a spot for it up here. You want to change the color in this case so that it matches your other filters. Oh, nope, that's not what I wanted. I'm looking for background color. There we go. Excellent. And then the thing to take note of, you may have seen as we were building metrics, is each metric has a field on it called date range dimension. For each metric, you decide what type of date range applies to it. And then when you use these date range controls, it is making the decision of what to filter based on what you set in that date range dimension. Okay, we are in the final stretch. We are almost done. There are a few more details I would suggest we add to finish this up. I would add in the header a last updated date. And in this case, I'm going to have it just be a text field that I update by hand. That way, when data gets stale, I can ensure the correct date is in that space. And then we also need to add some information about what is included in our dashboard, what's been filtered out, how we define these metrics. So I talk in the book a lot about being clear about your definitions and what the data is reporting. On this dashboard, I'd suggest putting a little box at the bottom to give that information. So let's go. Up here, we have a text field, and I'm just going to drop it right there. This will be last updated. And we're just going to put today's date, 8/21, 2026. I'm going to slide it up under here, and I'm going to change it to a different color so we can see it. Great. All right. Now you can add another text box, or you can just copy this one, and you can place it in the bottom down here where we're going to put more information. And maybe you want to put it at the very bottom so you can save space for other metrics you may want to add. Change the color back to black. It's okay. Just expand the footer here. Great. All right. And for now, I'm just going to be clear about what's included in my data set so that there's no confusion. You can see here I have 2 fiscal years, and so the totals right now are including both fiscal years. You have to intentionally filter out the earlier fiscal year. So we're going to say information and definitions. And what I'm going to put for now, I could probably elaborate more, and I suggest you do, but for the purpose of this demo, it's just going to say data set spans fiscal years 2025 and 2026. The ticket total includes comps. Comps have been filtered out of the average ticket price and the tickets over time chart, just to clarify. And I should also add capacity percent includes comps. All right, now we're getting close to being able to share. Before I do, I'm going to check a few things. First of all, I'm going to go into this view mode so you can see it how others would see it when they're not in edit mode. I'm going to click around a little bit and just test my filter. Let's go ahead and take out 2025 so that we have just 2026. There we go. So that gives us just the current fiscal year. Oh, I see an edit I missed. I need to format the currency on that goal chart. I'm going to check my event filters, make sure this is giving me what I want. Let's see, it's classical. Great. I might go through this process. I check my filters to make sure they're working. I might check them against other data sources to make sure I'm getting the right data. Let's see if I can limit the data set. I just want the year to date, January 1st. Okay. Apparently, we haven't done a classical concert in a while. Let me clear that filter and we'll get more data. There we go. All right. And then this is the point at which I just read this, and I would make sure that a colleague who opened this could very quickly read the metrics, understand them with no explanation. Is there anything that's unclear, or is this all very clear? And if so, then you can move on to starting to share this out. First, I'm going to go back to edit mode, and I'm going to fix my formatting here. So this is where you go into the aggregation and you change it to currency. Then you change it to no decimal points. And you have to do that for both revenue and goal. And I'm also noticing my axis is not quite right. So can we fix that? We want a single axis. Perfect. That is how we fix that. So this is also the check of your own work to make sure you haven't missed any really critical details. And now what you need to do is open your share settings. And you have a number of different options for sharing this dashboard. You can restrict it to people who you give the link to or email addresses you add to share. Also note that when you invite someone via email, you need to pay attention to whether you're inviting them to be a viewer, whether you're inviting them to be an editor of the dashboard. If you want this more open, you have a couple different options. If you're on a Google organization account, you can use the organization level access, or you can make it public and just share the link, and anyone with the link can access it regardless of their level of access. And sorry, I'm reading more closely. Public says they can find. Unlisted means they can view it, but they can't find. So that would be my recommendation. You're either going to be selecting unlisted at a viewer status to share it more easily with people in your organization, or the restricted are kind of your two main options. So you share your dashboard. You want to confirm the people that own the file and can edit it. And I think that's it for today. Remember some of the tenets of the book. When you're reporting out this data, you want to say what you observed. So the finding in a few words, you want to say what you believe the finding means, and you want to say what you'd expect to see if the explanation is right. All right, we are done for today's tutorial. Please make sure to check out the additional resources at theartsworkplace.com and pick up your copy of the Arts Data Handbook if you haven't yet. And please subscribe on YouTube to get more free tutorials and content.